Hey everyone, this is Ben Cecchini, founder of Give and Grow, here with another episode of the Give and Grow podcast. I'm super excited to introduce you to our guest today, Gloria Gutierrez. Gloria is a school counselor with her Master's of Arts in Counseling out in Torrance, California, with an exciting transition going on in life, transitioning internationally out to Thailand. So just really excited to catch you at this period of life. And if you're new to this podcast or the show, this is where we're going to dive in with some tips, tools, techniques for parents, teachers, and just other influential adults in kids' lives, all around the social emotional learning side. So mental and emotional health and intelligence. So Gloria, super excited to have you here on the show. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. It's a wonderful day. It's beautiful here.
Yes, amazing, amazing. And we just got into some like amazing pre-conversation. So I'm really excited to flow with you today and just share, like we said, tips and tools for anybody listening here today around their kids. So when it comes to social emotional learning, when it comes to your role in being a counselor and working with kids of a variety of ages, right? You're like pre-K to high school, you've been in elementary school for a while. Why are you passionate about this work?
Oh, it's so amazing. So one of the things I love about being a counselor is that the work the work allows me to support all students at the school, but in ways that I would never even envision they would go. So like I have kids come back to me years later that I didn't end up working with individually, but just said that the way I approached the classroom, the way that I spoke about the importance of calming down and being mindful and how our emotions work
Hmm.
really touched them or spoke to them in some way, or parents that I don't recall talking to saying that whatever difference I'm making for the kids, they can see it when they get home. So those, like, hearing them say, this is what I was able to do as a result of what you have done, is what the work is really about, is the difference that makes
Hmm.
the difference. Um,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of it is even just working with one family or with one kid, and it being obvious to others too. Like,
Right.
it just being available to help is all that's needed for many, even if they
Hmm.
never actually get to use the help themselves. They just appreciate knowing that it's available.
Yeah, I love that. And I can see that also tying into like parenthood, just being there. You don't need to fix. There's some things that you can't fix, or we were talking about this a little bit before, right? There's some things that you're going to try all the different burping movement techniques, shushing, humming, singing, but it just might not be what's needed, but you just being there is kind of enough. Can you talk a little bit about like in your approach some of the things that you do with a kid, the core components of your work that you feel translate to a parent and supporting their children at home?
Absolutely. So one of the things that happens a lot as the kids get a little bit older, fourth, fifth grade is what I'm thinking, is it is such a critical time. And it really, the groundwork happens before this, but at that time they start grappling with, are my parents the ones I can turn to support me in these deeper issues that I'm grappling with, like how to get along with others, what popularity is, and should I stand up to my friend when they're trying to make me do something that I don't think is the right thing to do, and and some of my work at that time is trying to help the parents negotiate or navigate how to offer that area or that space for their kids to be able to speak about
Mm,
that. Um, and like when those opportunities arise, it's so critical to handle them the right way, because the kids learn from those. And if they
right.
feel like it didn't go, like, I absolutely have had those conversations with the parents where, they shared, well, my kid came forward and told me something, and I immediately went to the other kids' parents that were involved in the situation, and we, had to talk it out, and like then it went really poorly. And
Right.
then kids were
Right.
like, I will never talk to you again.
Right.
And that's like worst case scenario, because you don't want your kid to feel like, when I involve my parents in the things that are happening for me that I am grappling with, it
Hmm.
blows up in my face, and now I'm the tattletale, and I made a big deal out of nothing. And maybe it was a big deal. That's why the parents felt like they needed to go to the nth degree and handle it.
Right.
But this is also when we're trying to empower them to be able to handle their issues as well. So the
Mm-hmm.
hardest job at this point is to try to pause from the feeling like I know how to solve their problem for them. I'll just tell them what to do.
Mm.
Like that is the hardest thing. It's pausing and thinking to yourself, like, if you've ever thought about the times that somebody gave you advice when it was unsolicited, and even if maybe it was solicited and you asked them desperately to tell you what to do, did you do it?
Mm.
Often enough, you'll find that the advice that was given, it ends up being the opposite of what the person does. And if you think of it in that prospect, like we might have the solutions, we have plenty of wisdom. We've been around a long time. We've done. I mean, most of the time we've been through what they've been through. Sometimes we haven't. Sometimes maybe
Right.
we got to see a sister go through it or heard somebody else go through it. But if we just try to tell them what to do, it's almost guaranteed that they will not. And then they won't
Mm-hmm.
tell you they didn't do it either.
Right.
You just get put out of the loop at that point.
Right.
So it's really like switching that role up to being just the listening ear, acknowledging whether they're coming to you because they just really need to rant. They just really need to like free flow out loud what they're saying to help themselves find the logic and the
Mm-hmm.
emotions in it. Um, whether they just need to complain and they're letting it out, or whether they
Right.
really are seeking, I don't know what to do about this. And even if
Mm-hmm.
they come to you and say, I don't know what to do about this, it's so hard, but don't tell them what to do. Don't do
Right.
it. Don't
Okay.
do it. Just try to figure out how you can ask them, like, what do you think you can do?
Right.
What advice would you give to a friend who came to you with the same problem?
Mm.
Help them as much as you can to find the answers they might already know. And 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 if they give you one and you're like, oh, just ask them what they think would happen. How would that
Right.
impact the other person? How would that impact
Mm-hmm.
you? What else could happen? What else
Mm-hmm.
could happen? What you're doing at that point in time is you're building the part of their brain that is connecting actions to consequences. And before you can even start talking about the logic side of things, you do got to go through and just let them have the emotions come out. You try to talk about those consequences and logic right away, it's going to wash right over them, and they're like, "Never mind, I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to talk about it." You got to give them space to let the emotions out and talk about how they're feeling about it. And maybe they don't know it yet. And maybe even as they're talking about it, there's lots of empty space. And sometimes you just have to let it sit so that they
Right.
can continue thinking through the thoughts they're having and have the space to let it out. Now, some tips that I
Mm-hmm.
find to be really helpful are um, you want to try to bring the pressure down as much as possible. It's not an interview. it's not a like an investigation when you're asking kids these questions. So I find doing a task next to each other kind of brings the feeling down for that
Okay.
pressure. I find walking together or being in a drive in the car, though you got to be really careful there because they can feel a little bit like they can't escape.
Yes, I
Um,
felt that.
maybe having an opportunity to like you got to use the non-judgmental tone and the non-judgmental words,
Mm-hmm.
um, and really come from a place of curiosity because you
Mm-hmm.
really are forming two critical skills besides even the logic. There is empowering them to feel like they can make choices in their own life that solve it, and empowering them to know that you're available to help them through those things but not solve it for them because one
Right.
day they're going to need to do it by themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and you want them to continue to come to you for that space when they need
Right.
it.
Yeah. Oh man, I feel like you just threw so many beautiful things. I'm really enjoying this breakdown of you mentioned it's like kind of fourth, fifth grade, maybe a little bit younger, maybe a little bit definitely a little bit older, for that approach. But the listening, the acknowledging, the non-judgmental, and just the empowerment that you broke down there, I feel like is so beneficial, right? It's really giving them the tools and the space to practice the tools and figuring it out for themselves. Like it makes all the sense in the world to me. And I could see how a kid would want to come back to that sort of space, especially the non-judgmental aspect of it, right? Like, okay, they're genuinely like here to listen, and it's okay if I kind of fail or fumble or just don't know, and I think that contributes a whole bunch to the kids being able to navigate and wanting to navigate it with you moving forward. Thanks for breaking that down, Gloria. What are some of the early signs, maybe in this specific example or age group, that a kid might be struggling? Whether they're keeping stuff inside or they're starting to communicate less, or just struggling with social emotional skills in general. What are some of those signs that you've seen over the years?
Um, I mean, some of them are more like physical signs or habit signs, like you might see them biting their nails or picking their fingers or not being able to fall asleep or not eating. If you're seeing any signs like that type of nervousness, I would talk to the teacher right away. I would ask to see whether there is a counselor, whether you can ask the counselor about it. Um, See if they're seeing those same signs at school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, anything that has to do with the way it's impacting their eating, their sleeping, weight gain or loss, um, any nervous habits you see or tics start to develop. And I mean, tics are actually quite common, so they don't always mean
Mm-hmm.
anything. So
Right. Right.
just let everybody know a lot of people develop them in some minor capacity, and they come and go, and you don't want to bring attention to them if you can help it
Right.
to the child.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then when like other signs that would be, I feel like we've gotten so used to kids getting individual time with devices. When you see it happening, if they're not able to exit from them, if they tantrum hardcore after being taken off of them, I mean those are some big signs too, because I don't feel like our access and exposure to devices and individual content is supporting these social emotional skills.
Mm-hmm.
I don't always know if the exposure is actually teaching them core skills or if it's just keeping them away from that space that they need. Because we we spent a lot of time in our youth um, with that, like I would hope, with the quiet time for our brain to be grappling with how to deal with situations. And
Right.
when you fill it with, constant content, your brain isn't getting to do that time
Mm-hmm.
consuming work
Mm-hmm.
of the space in between where, when you're playing with toys or when you're reading even a book, um, the brain is quietly thinking. But I feel like when it's being spoken at, or
Mm-hmm.
or with this entertainment content, that work isn't able to happen. So I get to
Yeah.
see, one of the struggles I'm seeing is a lot of kids who seem to have splintered with more maturity in some areas, with the types of conversations they're having with their peers about, like, I don't know, popularity and who's got what stuff. And those conversations are happening earlier than they used to happen, and with less of the emotional and social skills to help them grapple with what to do about them.
Mm.
Um, and I don't know if that's happening as a result of too much exposure.
Right.
Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of other signs, like, you know, it's always a problem if kids are having physical altercations with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if you if you see a lot of self-isolation, that is a major flag. Uh,
Okay.
if it looks like, well, you think to yourself, well, I was that kid who liked to read a lot of books and sit by myself. You might not remember that maybe you were doing it to avoid other kids too.
Right.
Maybe.
Right.
As opposed to
Right.
just wanting to be in that space. And
Yeah.
even if you just really like to be in the fantasy world and reading about different ways of being, uh, you could do that too much and also miss out on the skills that you need. That was a
Right.
really tough one for me. I definitely have the kids where they're reading a lot and I talk with them and I'm like, man, you're just so much more mature than your peers. No wonder you're having such a hard time.
Right.
And
Right.
then I have to tell them, when you get to middle school, you're going to find other people like you. I'm really sorry that you don't have any yet, but you're going
Right.
to do great. You're going to do just fine once you find some other kids that are just like you, bookish and like already thinking older than you are and not caught up in, I don't know, silly business.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that you're seeing that the splintering, as you put it, of like certain skills are happening more rapidly, and other skills seem the social emotional skills seem to kind of be potentially falling behind for some kids, but you're seeing that kind of trend out where you're at. I'm curious. I was when you brought up the tantruming around taking the device away. I feel like probably a lot of parents have had an experience, whether it's with a device or it's time to go, or you like from the park, or those sorts of things where just tantrums happen. Like what sort of advice or tools do you think are helpful for parents in those sorts of moments where things do get a little chaotic, or you know elevated?
You might not love my answer for this one.
Hey, that I already love your answer. I already love that.
Okay. The the advice that's out there on how much TV and social media and exposure that kids should have, especially to individual devices, let's say YouTube, it's all like an experiment. We don't have the data. We just don't say this much is okay
Mm-hmm.
because we don't know that the quality of the content makes a difference. I saw a study years ago that really opened up my eyes. They were comparing kids who watched Sesame Street to kids who watched Mr. Rogers. And two quality contents found that the kids who watched Mr. Rogers had more patience and empathy, even though we're talking about two high quality kids programs that both do great things. But just
Mm-hmm.
looking at that measure, right? Uh, to say, X number of minutes a day is appropriate, and you're still playing with a future that we just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Any content we need to be making sure that we are checking on and that we are restricting, because the connection between too much exposure to TV and these like inability to like these tantrums that happen at older ages than you'd expect for longer than you'd expect at these greater levels than you'd expect
Mm-hmm.
is directly correlated to just being like watching, like if I watch two movies back to back, if my kid watches two movies back to back, and then I say, okay, you've had plenty today, it's time to be done. I can expect a meltdown is what I can. Like
Right.
I can expect that the
Right.
meltdown would happen. It doesn't matter that they got enough. It actually is that the more they got, the harder it is to get
Right.
disconnected. So while I'd like to give advice to what do you do in that moment, I would say definitely don't give in.
Mm-hmm.
That just teaches them to go bigger and stronger next time. That if they
Mm-hmm.
tantrum harder, they will get what they want, and you're going to end up with a 9-year old that's like throwing things at the TV,
Yep.
um, or worse. So I think the answer, and this really is for a lot of those tantrums, you just have to write out the tantrum if it's happening. You have to make sure that you don't match the energy, that you stay calm.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you like showing anger to your child when they're angry like that does not help the situation at all. It just escalates it further. So like thinking to yourself, if you start getting angry, either you walk away if you can handle it, but thinking to yourself, what persona could I take on? Like how do I
Mm.
pull in my Mr. Rogers right here?
Ah.
How could I what would like how would the tone be? How would the talking be? How much space would there be in between?
Mm-hmm.
And they're gonna test you and push you, and you just got to keep going. Okay, Mr. Rogers, how would he do this?
Right. Right. I
because
love
because
that.
because you can't match that high energy with that high energy. You're just gonna end up duplicating it, like
Mm-hmm.
increasing it by four, right? So, um, staying firm, making sure that you if they use disrespectful language towards you, that you are clear and concise about that is not acceptable in our household. You do
Mm-hmm.
not speak to me that way. I don't speak to you that way. And that goes back to like the family values of making sure. I mean, you're actually practicing what you're preaching in that regard, so that's
Right.
challenging too
Right.
sometimes. Um, and then again, not letting not like you can wait till it's all over to find the right space to talk it through with them. But I
Mm-hmm.
think the right answer is to figure out how to prevent them as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think of it like sleep begets sleep. If you think I'm going to keep my kid up during the day so they're going to sleep more at night, that's not always what happens. It usually
Mm.
isn't. They'll end up just staying up and they'll still wake up in the middle of the night. But if you have them sleep more, they will actually sleep more. And I feel like the same is true for the tantrums. The more tantrums they have, the more tantrums they have.
Mm,
They they start getting used to being in that space of I get to react this way when I get upset about something.
right.
So trying to prevent them as much as possible makes when they happen, the outlier or the like the unexpected event is like how can I prevent them as much as possible so it doesn't become their
Right.
normal.
Right.
And if you're finding that they're happening as a result of being in front of the TV too long, then I think that's your answer, right? You
Yep.
got to figure out. And I mean, I think about it like in China, they literally have a restriction on how much video games kids can have. They can only have
Interesting.
2 hours a week. That's it.
Wow.
And that's
Wow.
on one day, and everybody does it at the same time. Everybody gets
Wow.
Friday night from like 7 to 9, and that's it. That's all they get. Like I don't remember what the times are, and I don't
Right.
know if it's still in place. But China realized they were having a problem, and this is what you could do in a dictatorship. They just said,
All right. They shut it down.
shut it down. No video games for anyone under 18
Mm-hmm.
until or 18 and under. I think I don't know if they did 18.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
but they looked at it, went, we're losing a generation of kids to these things that are not benefiting us as a country.
Yeah,
Um,
I can totally like just to jump in here a little bit. I can see that in my own self practices. If I've been on Instagram too long scrolling, or if I have sat down and binged 3, 4 shows in a row, one, it's harder to disconnect from that, and it makes it harder to reconnect with myself. I'm a guy that practices mindfulness. I go on mindful walks. I might sit and just breathe for 5, 15, 30 minutes, and so I practice those skills, but definitely it makes it so much more challenging when I've been on a device for a long time. And so part of that practice for even me, and I'm sure other adults out there, is like having that awareness and setting those boundaries for ourselves of, okay, this is the amount of time where it's purposeful, it's functional, it's okay to be entertained by a movie, by a show, by an app or whatever. And where does it get to that point where it starts to, like, even though I might not be throwing a tantrum, it's hard to disconnect from, and it's easy to understand at those points why kids would throw tantrums, because it's like you're pulling them from this thing that has kind of locked them in a way. I can totally see that. So I really appreciate that just proactive approach, to the tantrums of like, let's get ahead of this thing. What are the things causing it, and how can we kind of provide solutions, upstream. Upstream?
and
Yeah.
it's okay for your kid to be bored.
Right.
It's
Right.
okay.
And I
It's
think
okay.
to your point, those are giving them the opportunities to reconnect with themselves, to be back in the present moment, to have the processing happen in their mind, in their body, their emotions, and to be present for that. I mean, so much of the mind, you threw out mindfulness earlier, is just that, like being present and witnessing what's going on in our body. And then from there, we're gaining a lot of emotional intelligence, a lot of awareness, and a lot of information that can help us navigate that the next time, help us choose which way we want to go with the rest of our day, if especially if there was a conflict or chaos that happened at home in the relationship. So yeah, I'm definitely picking up what you're putting down here, Gloria. I appreciate that. Um, you know, you kind of talked a little bit about once they get to that place, let it rest, like give it some space for the tantrum to kind of ride out. Are there any other like ways that parents could, oh, oh, I'm bringing back up what just popped into my mind that totally threw me off track was the Mr. Rogers thing that you mentioned, channeling your Mr. Inner Rogers, because that one, nobody's mentioned that, kind of having that persona of like, what do I want to embody here and now? Because it's not the anger, it's not the frustration, right? I feel like that's such a powerful tool to help model emotional regulation that I feel like is really fresh. I haven't heard many people talk about that. Can you offer up anything else that might help a parent model emotional regulation at home?
Um, let's see. Well, I do. Kids are so into their own perspective. You hear so often the parents, like the kids are like a parent say, I could tell them a million times and they're not going to listen to me say it. And it's really hard, because that does happen when there's a lot of talking, and not a lot of connecting to how they're thinking about it and how they're feeling about it. So, taking regular moments to check in and ask them what they understood or what that means to them, or what do they think I'm trying to say,
Mm.
uh, can be helpful. Uh, at times, and this you have to like handle it the right way. Again, if it sounds like you're preaching, it can just go like right over.
Hmm.
But if they're willing to open up and be vulnerable at some point, it might be a time to share about how it was for you at that age. But again,
Mm.
that could be, if it gets overused, it's just gonna like, well, it's not the way it was for you, mom, right?
Right,
It's not,
right.
and that they may lose its strength. Uh, I find having other, like an aunt and uncle or an older sister help,
Hmm.
provide that other, like a secondary or another perspective, often can be a very powerful way of helping them navigate some of those emotions that come through.
Hmm.
And then as a parent, and you got to be a pretty good actor for this, but if you're going through a part of your day and something frustrating happens, and even if you, because we don't realize how many coping skills we're using all the time. We just
Mm.
we've been using them for so long we don't even think about it, right? But let's say I'm driving and somebody cuts me off and I feel my blood race and I immediately bring it back down because I know how to do that. Um, that happens in the black box of our brain, and we never verbalize it, and the kids don't know what's
Mm.
happening inside of us. So those can be opportunities to share, like, oh, something just happened that really made mommy upset, and I felt my heart start to race, and I felt the beads of sweat form, and my cheeks got hot, and I felt me like grab my hands and squeeze them, and it made me notice that I needed to take a moment to calm myself down, because anger is telling us something really important. Frustration is
Hmm.
telling us something really important, and we want to be able to listen to it, but we can't do anything when we're angry still. We have to
Hmm.
calm our body down, and then we can make the choices that will make the situation better. So
Right.
while we're angry is not the time. But all this, again, it happens so naturally within us, we don't even think about
Hmm.
it, and then the kids don't get a benefit from putting those bodily sensations uh, into the place they belong, which is that they're telling us something that's important
Right.
that we can use then. Should we take the moment to calm down and notice them, and then move from there, instead of just, there's a lot of like, I just don't want it. I like just don't want to
Right.
feel that way.
Get rid
But
of it.
you know,
Yeah.
we would be in a much worse space if all we ever did was try to eject those uncomfortable feelings, because
Hmm.
it's that discomfort that helps us grow.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't grow when we're comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. And to your point, they're here to communicate something with us. They're here to communicate potentially that a need's not met. And then we have these coping skills. So I really just appreciate using that real time verbalizing. That word I feel like is really powerful and stuck out to me in your share, like verbalizing what is going on, the sweat, the rosy cheeks, the clenching, and that body awareness. We're helping them to shift their focus onto, oh, what is my body feeling? Right? Just by you sharing. And that's why in my mind, it's social emotional learning, because these are all things that one way or the other we picked up along the way. This is just a more intentional, mindful, and potentially healthier way to learn these different skills. They don't have to necessarily learn by trial and error, even though they will. They'll learn by figure out what works for them. But we're sharing our own insights into what's been helpful in a way that I think is I've found with the kids that I coach, not a parent yet, but the kids that I coach on the basketball court, like modeling that, it's like, oh, it reminds them that we're human too, and I think that brings some empathy into the game as well. It's not like you're respecting me out of fear now. You're respecting me because you recognize I'm a human, and that's like empathy led respect, which is just seems really, really powerful. So I just appreciate you breaking that down that way. We're about to wrap
Can I
up
add a
here.
little?
Yeah,
Oh,
please,
can I
please,
add a
please.
little bit?
Yeah.
So like the first step is the bodily sensations, then connecting it to what the emotion is. And then if you feel like you can go up a level, the next part is to start talking about whatever the thoughts you were having that made you start feeling that way. Like,
Mm.
he cut me off. what a mean person, right? If you want to, if
Right.
you, like some kids can't say jerk, I say jerk,
Right.
whatever. But
Right. Right.
like, and then I was started thinking like, how dare they? What do they think they should be doing over there? And that I noticed was making my body more angry and more upset.
Hmm.
And then I took a breath and calmed myself down. So talking them through what you did to calm those
Right.
bodily sensations down, and then you can start bringing the logic in, right? Because we've noticed the emotions. We've noticed the physical sensation of the emotions. We've connected with the emotions that they've occurred. We use our bodily sensations to help ourselves calm down, and then we can start thinking about what were the thoughts I was having that got me there, and
Hmm.
then you can connect it back to now what are the thoughts I can use to help myself with the situation. I might think to myself, I don't really know what that guy was going through. Maybe he really didn't see me. Maybe
Right.
he's in a hurry. Maybe he's just one of those people who does cut people off, and he's got to be that guy who is the
Hmm.
type of person to cut people off, and I don't envy him for that, right?
Hmm.
So like we have a lot of
Hmm.
different ways that we can think through these things, and yes, there are just mean people out there, and sometimes they didn't notice us, and
Right.
sometimes there was no mean spirit to it, and sometimes maybe they're trying to get to the hospital because they have an injured person in the car.
Right.
We don't know, but those
Yeah.
that extra bringing it back to the logic side of why whether it matters
Right.
is a good way to bring it back. Yeah.
Right. I really appreciate you breaking down those steps. That's always helpful for me anyways to be like, okay, kind of what's a go-to process that I can have here that would be helpful for breaking it down for myself or walking somebody else through these steps. So, Gloria, is there any place where people can get in touch with you or, reach out with any questions, or they just found you and your energy helpful and connected for them?
I wish I could tell you that I was launching a podcast or something, but it hasn't happened yet. So I guess I have to do it to make it
Right.
happen. um, I have not yet made any like public persona that I'd be
Hmm.
willing to share, but if it does come, I will share it with you so you can add it at the end of the
Sounds
tagline here.
sounds
Uh,
good.
as, as I go to Thailand, I'm sure it'll be. I've definitely had people asking me they want to follow, and I wasn't born into necessarily that social media life.
Uh-huh. Right, right, right.
was
Well, it's probably that proactive approach that has helped you, get to where you're at today emotionally, socially, the upstream approach. But truly, Gloria, thank you so much for your time, your energy, everything that you shared. For everybody that's listening out there, thank you for your time as well. We're hoping you're walking away with as many little nuggets as I am today in preparation for parenthood and just wanting to be someone who's helping kids on this social emotional life journey. So, Gloria, once again, just thank you for your time and energy.
Thank you very much.